everyone. Welcome to our first ever audio event, Strength Despite Stigma. We're excited to be with you today and look forward to bringing you information and firsthand accounts from members of NAMI Virginia. My name is Mary Beth Walsh.
And I am Sarah Schmatz. Mary Beth and I are both staff members with NAMI Virginia, and we're excited to be your hosts for this series. Over the course of the next 4 weeks, we'll explore the stigma that surrounds mental health, what it is,
what it's like to personally deal with stigma,
and how we can make changes to be better allies and advocates for those living with mental health conditions.
While Sarah and I can talk about stigma until we are blue in the face, we want to really hone in on what it's like for people who have experienced it. So we are joined by 6 amazing NAMI Virginia members. We have a combination of families and individuals who are living with mental health conditions who will share their personal experiences with stigma. So, we keep mentioning this word stigma, but what does it actually mean?
According to Merriam-Webster, stigma is a mark of shame or discredit, an identifying mark or characteristic, specifically a specific diagnostic sign of a disease. Stigma can manifest in 3 ways. Publicly, through negative societal attitudes and beliefs like stereotypes, prejudice, or discrimination.
Through self-stigma, which is a person's internalized negative beliefs. And structural stigma, which is when policies are impacted and barriers are put up that keep people living with mental illness from accessing services, like stronger sentencing recommendations from some jurors when a defendant has a mental illness.
It is our hope that these episodes will help shine a light on the stigma that still surrounds mental health and get you thinking and talking about it in new ways. But before we get started, we'd like to have our guests introduce themselves.
Hi, my name is Marie. I live in Clark County. The local NAMI affiliate is NAMI Northern Shenandoah Valley. I have had depression my entire life, and my diagnoses are major depressive disorder and anxiety. I am now a NAMI in our own voice presenter, and I work as a peer recovery specialist.
Hi, I'm Linda, and I'm with the NAMI Rappahannock in Fredericksburg, Virginia area. And I've been involved with NAMI for about 15 years, taking many classes or teaching classes. And my lived experience is having a child that has a mental health condition, and we have been on a long and windy road together.
Hi, my name is Ron, and I'm Linda's husband. And as she mentioned, we live in the Fredericksburg, NAMI Rappahannock area. So my perspective is coming from a family of someone with mental illness, particularly the male view, the father view.
Hello, my name is Elena. I am in Chesapeake, Virginia. I'm a part of the Coastal Affiliate. I was diagnosed at the age of 11, 12 with depression and anxiety, and my other diagnoses include PTSD and borderline personality disorder. And I'm happy to say that I am a NAMI interim voice presenter, as well as a co-facilitator for the People of Color Recovery Support Group.
Hello, my name is Andalisa, and I am from Richmond, Virginia. I am affiliated with the NAMI Central Office group, and I am the parent of a now 20-year-old who has some mental health challenges, and I have been affiliated or peering with NAMI for the past 7 to 8 years, and I now serve on their Virginia Family Network Advisory Board.
Hi, I'm Liz. I live in Providence Forge, Virginia, and I've been involved with NAMI for about 10 years now. I have OCD and started developing that when I was in middle school, and I also have many friends and family members that have mental health conditions, so I have a lot of lived experience both as a caregiver and as someone with a mental health condition. I've done a lot of volunteering with NAMI Northern Virginia and NAMI Virginia in a myriad of programs over the years.
All right, so we're just going to jump right on in to the meat of why we're here. Kind of with the first question, just to see what the pulse is of the group. So Elena, I'll just start with you. An easy question, I guess. What is mental health stigma to you?
So to me, the immediate image I have in my mind is Lifetime movies, because I don't particularly like Lifetime, and I think it's because of the movies and the way they portray mental illness. It's like the characters they have on there have these extreme symptoms, and like it's just so dramatic, and they end up killing each other, and it's just scary. And the way that media portrays people who may have symptoms of a mental illness is just scary. And a lot of people do enjoy Lifetime movies. Not to say all Lifetime movies are bad, but that's the immediate image that I get in my mind when I think of stigma, is the Lifetime movies.
Does anybody have any thoughts on what Elena said around her portrayal, or what she.
Well, I think she was on point talking about the perceptions of people with a mental illness based on what we hear in the news and what we see in the movies. And one of the things, like we do some crisis intervention training at the police academy here, and the thing that when you have people with a mental illness that are there and officers are asking questions, that officers see, hey, these are just people like people I know, and that helps reduce the stigma. Because I think the main problem about stigma is people are afraid to even talk about it. Like they're afraid to talk about suicide or mental health, the way I remember where they used to be afraid to talk about cancer.
Why? I mean, you brought up a really good point, and it brought up a question for me. Why? I wonder why people are afraid. Like, why is there that fear that to even talk about it?
I don't know about the fear, what that might be. Well, there are fears if you have a high security clearance and you work for the government or the military. There's fears that you could, lose your clearance and so forth. But it's the thing that we found, that when you talk about it and you open up about it, it's surprising how many other people all of a sudden come forward and start to talk about their experience. That by being the first one to talk about it, that helps kind of open people up and helps to change the stigma. And the other part is we need to speak up about it. And if there's some misperceptions about mental illness and we're in a group of people or something, we need to say, well, hold on a second.
I think that for me, some of the reason for stigma is in addition to being afraid of people, it's being afraid to face things in ourselves, where if somebody is other, and in this case, other is having a mental health condition, then that's not me. And I'm safe from that, and that won't happen to me, or I don't have to take responsibility. Like one of the things I was thinking of immediately is what Elena and Ron both touched on, which is it drives me up the wall that immediately, if there has been a mass shooting incident, or if quite often if a person of color has been killed by the police, one of the very first things out is talking about mental health, as if somehow like, well, that's the justification. And it's almost easier to believe, like it's psychologically, it's safer to say, oh, that's why, because if you strip that away, then we have to start dealing with some really difficult things about ourselves and our society. So like, it's a terrible defense mechanism, but in a way, it's a defense mechanism too, I think.
It's kind of like a scapegoat, what you're saying, Liz. I think it's kind of an easy catch-all scapegoat. We don't have to worry about that. That's mental illness.
Exactly. And then another one, which is like a little bit of a lighter side, but I don't know if you all have experienced this, but one of the things that's maybe not deliberately stigmatizing or not meant to be mean is when somebody says, oh, that's so OCD, or I'm so OCD, I have to keep everything in order, or, oh, she's so bipolar, one day she's happy, the next day she's mad. And I don't know if it's directly stigmatizing, but it's one where it's trivializing, like, you don't never say, oh, that's what somebody with cancer would say. Like, that would never come out of your mouth. So it's really, I think a lot of times innocuous and inadvertent, like it's not intended to be othering, but it is, because it's like, I wish that my obsessive compulsive disorder were just having to like keep my socks in a row. Like, do you know how much easier my life would be if that were the case? So like, I think those things can get wrapped up into stigma too.
And Liz, I agree with you. I think that some people use that just to desensitize everything, so that, oh, that's just that, and that's just this. And, they just say it, like you say, trivialize it, not knowing the seriousness that, like you said, if you could just stop doing that, you would be like, it would be so cool if you could, but you don't have, that's not an option for you at this moment. And one of the things that I noticed with stigma, especially when my son was in school and a lot younger, is that people in the school system or out in public are judging your kid on their behavior, not knowing what all is going on. So that stigma of, oh, your child is just bad, so there's a lot of that. And then that guilt as a parent, like you feel judged on all levels, and it doesn't have anything to do with your parenting. But just that whole stigma, if you see a child doing something out in the grocery store, doing something, oh, they're just bad, not knowing that they could be overstimulated or anything like that. It's just that assumption that, oh, that kid's just misbehaving. So I've had a lot of that raising my son.
And if I could just add, even when people trivialize it a little bit, like Liz had mentioned, it does give us the opportunity to bring it to attention and educate them and tell them a little bit more about it. So I feel that any talk out there about it gives us a chance to advocate.
I was just going to add too, with the whole idea of fear and mental illness. I mean, there's a lot of unknown in terms of treatment. I know that I've personally gone through many different treatments for things that I got zapped in my skull when I had the transcranial magnetic stimulation, and the doctor was like, it's 62% effective in most patients. And so it's kind of like, this might work, but it might not work. And so I think there's a legitimate kind of like, we don't know. And so when things are uncertain, people get fearful. And like Linda said, it's a good opportunity to really educate people about, different treatments and what the symptoms are, et cetera. So I just think the fear of not knowing, and there's so much that doctors and people in general don't know about the brain and how the brain works. It's not like, you have to, do surgery and do a lobotomy and like look into somebody's brain. You can't necessarily do that. And so it's scary when you don't know and you don't necessarily have answers. And I will say that for me, it's definitely been a trial and error thing. And it's, we always say it works for me, it may not work for you. And so it's a lot of, trial and error.
The other thing I think is we have to elevate mental health and put it on par with physical health, which our society has to start to move in that direction, and that will help change the stigma. The scary part is I think COVID-19 has brought up a lot of mental health issues like anxiety and depression, particularly with the younger people. And a concern I have is when our culture, society does catch up, we have such a shortage of mental health professionals, psychiatrists, and so forth, it's going to take time to catch up.
These are some awesome points. I wanted to chime in and I'm curious to know, we've sort of touched a little bit on this, but I'd love to hear, anyone's personal experience of a time when they felt stigmatized. I know for me, I take antidepressants, and I have been open and vocal about taking a pharmaceutical to help treat my major depressive disorder. And some of my more, holistic, natural friends, who I love and whose practices I value and I integrate into my life as well, have really come for me. And I think there is, even within our mental health community, still some barriers that we need to break down, especially in terms of sort of self-efficacy and self-resiliency in recovery, and knowing and trusting what is good for us and what works for us might not be something that works for someone else. So I'm just curious to hear if there are any particular examples of those kind of small, maybe innocuous and maybe well-meaning, but definitely accidentally stigmatizing moments that we could talk about.
I mean, I'm happy to jump in the deep end of the pool here. So this was from when I was about 12 or 13, and I didn't know I had OCD at that point. I didn't get a diagnosis for another 7 years, but I was at a sleepover. And so this was about 25 years ago. So I think we've come farther in conversation since then. So prefacing it with that, I was at a sleepover at a friend's house, and one of my main symptoms, the only I had at the time, was compulsive hand washing. If I went to the bathroom, like, please expect to see me like many moons later. Eventually I'll make my way out. And I came out of the bathroom, and my friend's mom goes, "What were you doing in there, Liz? You were in there forever. Were you taking a shower? I could hear the water running the whole time." And I just remember feeling so ashamed and so embarrassed. And she wasn't trying to make me feel terrible. I can't really blame her, because I didn't know what was wrong, but it was one where, like, I didn't know what was wrong, but I knew also that I wasn't just doing this because I felt like it and it was fun. And so, like, that lack of understanding, like, I remember that very clearly. That's one of the things where, like, when I tell my story, like, that's one of the things that were like, this sticks out to me, because it was unintentional, but it hurt. I was really embarrassed. I didn't know why it was happening. I couldn't stop it. But here's an adult being like, "What's wrong with you?" And I'm like, "Cool, I'm cool. That's fine. Can I go back over here? Thanks."
Thank you for sharing that, Liz. I'm sorry that happened. I feel like sometimes adults speaking with children can sometimes be some of the least compassionate and least understanding. That can be one of the least understanding dynamics sometimes, because I am not a parent, so I can't speak to this, but I know, as someone who hopes to be a parent one day, I am already nervous for my future children, and I want to protect them and keep them safe. But I can imagine being confronted like something like that is so out of your control. It may feel just overwhelming.
I was just gonna add to, and I don't know if this is the appropriate time to mention it, but I think one of the reasons that, and I'm so grateful to NAMI Coastal for allowing us to have this people of color group, because it provides a safe space for everybody to talk about what they're dealing with. And I think for me, growing up, and even to an extent now, it's the whole Black people don't have mental illness. And if you do, you need to go to church, you need to have somebody pray over you, and then you'll be fine. So if I had disclosed to somebody that I trusted that I was on medication, and they said, "You know what, you need to get off that medication and just go get some holy water, you'll be fine." And just like Sarah, you're talking about, in my mind, it's like, okay, well, why can't both things be true? Why can't I pray and also go to therapy and also take my medication? Like, why does it have to be one thing? And to be perfectly honest, I still struggle with people and having this conversation, because I think in my journey, I'm still trying to figure out the right routine for myself, and I'm constantly trying to tweak things so I can, continue in my wellness journey. And so, yeah, it's, learning like, okay, like, that's fine, you take valerian root, but I don't want to take valerian root, So that's something that I definitely have experienced, and I still do today.
What I find fascinating is that people have a problem if someone's on medication. When, if you watch the nightly news, after the first 5 minutes, there's every medication you could possibly think of that they're telling you about. There are new bipolar medications that I didn't even know existed out there. So it's like the message is take a bunch of medications, and that's why I don't understand if someone has a mental health issue, take a medication if it helps you.
And Elena, I really understand that as far as with, especially coming from a Baptist church, that not saying you can pray everything away, but more particular, anything with dealing with your mind, they feel like you can pray that into existence. But my confusion has always been, if you have someone in the church that's taking high blood pressure medicine or heart medicine, you're not telling them to pray that away and stop taking that meds. It's like you have to have a pastor or a church group that understands that you have to use wisdom too. So if you go to the doctor for your heart, why can't you go to the doctor for your mind? It's the organ just like your heart and your lungs.
You just hit on a key thing, though, that many of us might have to face is there are cultural issues that you have to deal with. I mean, that's got to be difficult.
I know, like Liz was saying, one incident that stands out of her mind about stigma that I remember when my son was in elementary school. And at the time, I was a social worker working with kids in foster care. So I was always around kids and helping other kids. And he had an incident in school and I had to come and pick him up. One of many times I had to come and pick him up. And I remember walking in the building and getting ready to walk into the office, and they had like a cafetorium right on the side. And I could hear the cafeteria lady say, "Yeah, that's his mom. And she a social worker too. It don't make no sense how that boy act." And that just hurt so bad. Like he had some control over that, and that me being a social worker was supposed to make sure he was supposed to be a good kid. And I will never forget that. It made me feel, it hurt so bad, and even hurt for my kids. So if I can hear her saying this, what has he heard, in the lunchroom, from other adults that should be more sensitive to this. So I'll never forget that experience.
And also, I think it's incredibly unfair to you, Andalisa, because the assumption that a parent isn't doing everything that they can, like, are there parents out there that don't? Sure. There's parents that do, parents are people too, and there's a lot of diversity, but like, I think it's just so mind-boggling, because once you start having conversations about mental health conditions and learning about them, the idea that it's almost like trying to pray it away, where you can't parent it away. You can't be like, okay, go sit in your room until you're not obsessive compulsive anymore. Like, that ain't gonna work. And so, it's incredibly unfair, and it's incredibly hurtful to be like, like, why aren't you doing more? And you're like, I'm doing everything I can within a system that's not great. And, it's a big burden, and my heart just feels for you.
And that serves the purpose that not just your school administrators and your teachers need to be educated on mental health issues, but anyone who would come into contact with those children in school, the lunch lady, the janitor, the nurse, anyone needs to know, I mean, without disclosing their personal history, but should be aware of what mental health issues are and how to deal with that, and at least be sensitive.
I'm curious to know, I kind of am sensing these themes coming up of community and either community support or lack of community support. So I'm wondering if anyone do you seek out communities where you can be your true authentic self with these mental health conditions, no matter what? And how do you go about doing that? Have you found the opportunity to sort of shift who you are with and how you have built your support system? What are some ways that you've worked on that to help kind of decrease these incidents of stigma in your life? If anybody could talk on that, that would be awesome.
Well, I'll start. I think at first, and remember this was about 15 years ago or more, there weren't that many resources that were made available to us as a family in dealing with our daughter. And by that, I mean, doctors didn't say you need to check out NAMI or you need to check out mental health, or they just didn't want to commit to her diagnosis early on. And I kind of understand that, but it also left us just kind of feeling lost. So then we did move from Northern Virginia down to Fredericksburg, and I found a pretty active NAMI Rappahannock group there. And I did find that I wanted so much to be around those parents, and even the ones living with the experiences, because I didn't know. I had to educate myself on every little thing that there was. So I did open up and find a better group of people that were understanding and sympathetic and empathetic, and they'd been through it all, so they knew no matter what I would say, there was not going to be any judgment, no shame, no blame, or any of that. So, and of course, since then, I feel like we're very open about talking about mental health, and why not be? And if someone doesn't want to hear how I feel about certain things, then maybe they're not the right friend for me. So that's that.
I think it's also important, if you're going to talk about mental health, is how you do it with a sense of being grounded, not kind of hesitant to talk about it. Talk about it like I'm talking about anything else. The thing that fascinates me is when I go talk to the crisis intervention training with the police department, the first thing we ask is, 40 people in there, who's ever heard of NAMI? Raise your hand. Rarely does anybody raise their hand. That astounds me. What really astounds me, of all the years that we've gone to psychologists and counselors and psychiatrists, why have they not mentioned NAMI? I don't get that.
I was going to say something similar to what Linda said, because once I went into intensive treatment, I was in a partial hospitalization program a few years ago. I sort of stopped everything to focus on my mental health, because I really had no choice at that point. My life was just unmanageable. And so once I went through that, I was a different person, really. I had a completely new set of values and priorities, and I sort of inadvertently did come to rely on different people as my supports, because I found I didn't have a lot in common anymore with people that I used to. I found that people still wanted to, do things that didn't interest me anymore. And I've also found that, as a few of us have mentioned, it's very important for me to be very open with my communication. That's vital to maintaining my recovery and strengthening my recovery. And I think a lot of people are very uncomfortable with that. A lot of people are uncomfortable with vulnerability, openness, raw, talking about emotions and things. And that has become a natural part of who I am. And so, as Linda said, it just kind of separates you from people who just aren't your tribe anymore. If someone is going to be bothered by my openness, by my lack of self-consciousness about having mental illness and talking about it and trying to educate people, that's okay. Then that's just not a person that I need to have around me, and I hope that they educate themselves at some other point in their life with another person who comes along.
Marie, I totally like what you said when you said find another tribe. And once I did find out about NAMI and the Virginia Family Network and being around other parents, it was so, we just had like a meeting, we went out to eat, and I never felt so free and liberated. I wasn't judged. If I said, well, my kid did this, nobody went like, oh my God. I mean, there was no judgment. And like I said, at the time I was a social worker, I didn't have to be the professional. I could just be the mom. And that was, to me, was like, it was like, whew. And I just really kept in touch with those ladies, and I could talk to them, anytime I needed to talk with them. There was nothing my son could do that would make them go, oh my God. Like I said, there was no judgment, and it gave me the liberty to kind of heal and not put so much pressure on myself, because I was hearing all this from other people about, oh, well, you should do this, or, this or that. And, it was like a place of Zen, and I could just woosah and be myself and be a mom, and everything was okay and wasn't judged, and I could get support and tips, and, they would tell me some things. And after a while I was like, wow, okay, well then maybe he's okay. He's not that bad. you know, it normalized it for me. So that was like awesome to find my tribe with them.
And Elisa, I had this same experience or a similar experience coming to NAMI. I started with the family to family program, and again, it was just amazing to have, there wasn't like it was a stigma-free zone. Like there was, you know, people who had the same experiences, and, you know, we could come in and say like, I've had a really rough week, my sibling did X, and someone's like, my kid did X too. And you're like, how did you do this? Did you call these people? I called these people that way, you know, like it's just, it's amazing having it not be a thing, like having that stigma isn't there, where that judgment isn't there, where then you can actually get down to acknowledging things like, you know, there were days when I loved my sibling, but I did not like them one iota, and I could come in and say I'm really angry at them, which is, you know, I don't know, I felt like I wasn't supposed to say that about somebody who was very, very, very depressed and having a really hard time in life. And but I would like, they would do things and you're like, this would not be tolerated for anybody else, you know. It was nice. It's so nice to have a place where you can come and acknowledge those feelings and those experiences, and everyone else is like, yep, I'm right there with you. You're like, and like the answer isn't like, oh, you know, that's weird, or you did what, or it's like, that must be really hard. You know, I've experienced something similar. Let me, you know, let's talk about it. Like it was pretty life changing.
I'd also throw out, I'm going to make a generalization, that men don't get mental illness as well as women do. A lot of moms take the burden of it. I think part of it's because men were brought up, many of them, of you don't cry, you be strong, you be tough, and you take action. Because I know when our daughter, first time she tried to commit suicide, my thing was do action. And I did a lot of action things. What I didn't realize later that a lot of women and moms get is sometimes you don't take action, you just listen. And that was the most powerful thing I learned, of you don't have to do anything. You can just be there and listen. Very powerful thing.
And just to piggyback that, when I was in the psychiatric facility, the initial way that I found out about NAMI was actually the hospital did have some flyers, and my dad decided to take the family to family class. And I always mention how life-changing it was. I mean, this was probably 8+ years ago, and I was not in a good space. However, it really shifted our communication because my dad as well is a fixer. And I think that taught him that, okay, maybe the best way to support Elena is just to listen. Or my dad would always do this thing where, and I appreciate it, he used to be like, let's go to lunch. Like he would just take me out to eat and we'd just talk. And sometimes I would just cry on his shoulder and he would just be there, like a physical presence. And it just was so healing to me. And I just love what you said, Ron, because it's so true. It's so true.
I wanted to go just a little deeper, if I could, on what Aunt Elisa and Liz were saying before about being able to open up to people, because it is so powerful. It's so very powerful when you're validated like that. And I know when I did that for the first time, I felt, okay, I'm not crazy. I'm not the only one that feels this way. And I think all of us understand how powerful that is. And so I think the challenge with the stigma around this, once we stop stigmatizing ourselves and realize, oh, we're not crazy, a lot of people share the same thing, comes all down to education. And so how do we get to that place of educating people to relieve the stigma? Because I think when we're out in the community, in society, wherever, I think we have a tendency, I do anyway, to feel like we're outnumbered. You know, I'm open and in touch with my mental health, but probably not a lot of the people around me are. So I'm cautious with what I say to people I don't know in certain circumstances. But I hope anyway, that if someone who isn't really in tune with mental health and doesn't really think about it could witness a conversation among many people who are, I think that they would understand, okay, it's not this one person who's out at the store talking about mental illness. And I'm thinking, oh, okay, she's a little cuckoo. But no, hey, there are all these people from all walks of life, and they all look just like you or me. And so maybe there's something to this. Maybe we do need to educate ourselves. And I think that's the big challenge. And we still have a long way to go. We know how far we've come in the last, I would say, couple of decades, maybe, and more every day, certainly, as Ron said, with the pandemic, certainly that's brought it up to the forefront even more. But I think we still have a long way to go in raising that level of communication and dialogue, to really finally address it, bring it out in the open, not like Ron said, people used to whisper cancer, he couldn't talk about it, so that it's just an everyday thing. It's normalized, and we all are aware that there's nothing wrong with us if we have mental illness. It's just another thing like diabetes or, heart disease, and we just have to manage it.
Well said, Marie. This is a wonderful conversation. And I think that was also what Marie said, a wonderful segue into our episode 2. So thank you all for sharing your experiences with, stigma, the big word stigma. And for those of you listening, please stick with us and come back for episode 2, where we'll keep talking about this and dive a little bit more into the stigma and how we can talk about it and make it more out in the open.
NAMI Virginia is a nonprofit organization that offers free support, education, and advocacy for families and individuals impacted by mental illness.
This audio event was made possible due to the generous support of our funders and individual donors like you.
If you're interested in supporting our work, please visit our website at www.namivirginia.org/donate.